It's Mike Lensing here with my co-host Jason Spunkle tonight. And since we last got together, Jay, we've had, I would say, an incredible flurry of news. Plus, we have crowned a new NBA champion, the Oklahoma City Thunder. So I think what we're going to do is start with the finals. Where do you want to take this first?
I mean, what was probably going to be a great game got ruined, and it's really really sad that it got ruined. And you and I were texting right after it happened, and I think after they beat the Indiana beat the Cavs, I never would have envisioned that I was rooting for the Indiana Pacers to win the NBA championship. But the second Halliburton went down, I was like, well, I guess I'm rooting for Indiana now because I want them to win. And listen, I give them a lot of credit. They went and won Game 6. Oklahoma City looked lifeless in Game 6. Um, Game 7 happens. Halliburton, they had said he understood the risks. He understood all this stuff like before the games. I heard him talking. And you had people saying, oh, he wasn't really that hurt. It's just a calf strain. He's never really hurt. You know, I love like scrolling all the Twitter people who were saying, oh, he's not really hurt. Skip Bayless was tweeting that he's not really hurt. Well, the
It's kind
Indiana
of like
really,
us, kind of like us with the Cavs.
yeah, a toe injury is different than I mean, there's been a proven record with calf strains though. I mean, this goes back like I mean, the Dame situation. Okay, Tatum didn't have a calf strain before he got hurt, right?
I don't believe so. Hard to know, right? I mean, the truth is,
Yeah.
it's hard to know whether or not those two things are connected, but it does feel like when you think about the Kevin Durant situation in 2019 in the finals, and then you think about this Halliburton injury and the fact that you could see the Achilles tendon snapping when you're looking at the slow motion replay, and the fact that they both had calf strains, it definitely seems like whatever was going on with each of them was a pretty similar situation. Yet at the same time, obviously, no one, not even doctors, can know for sure whether or not those two things are directly connected. As you said, Tatum, no injury prior to doing his Achilles. So who knows? Obviously, the end result of the Halliburton injury is devastating for Indiana in game 7, and then devastating for Indiana moving forward. And I think back to what we talked about last week and just sort of the confusion of what is Indiana, who are the Indiana Pacers right now in this season, and then who are they going to be moving forward? And now you obviously can't even really answer that question. I mean, you answered in such a way where they're not nearly what they would have been had Halliburton come out of that game healthy and not having torn his Achilles. Indiana probably goes into next season in the Eastern Conference certainly as one of the two, maybe three favorites at the top of the Eastern Conference. Now, I think you're probably looking at them and saying, are they fighting for a top 6 seed?
They
Probably at
were
some
they were
point. That's kind
they're
of where you look
sixth
at them.
on the rankings, Mike. Like when you betting on Cavs are the first team, just so you know. You weren't
Yeah, not
like
surprising. We'll get
coming
to the
out.
Cavs. We can get to the impact on the Cavs very briefly in a minute, but let's just stay with the
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
finals. What what do you think just your overall takeaway from the series and how you viewed Indiana? I know, as you said, we started thinking about, are we now really rooting for Indiana, who, as you said, we couldn't have envisioned that a month ago when they knocked off the Cavs. But what was it specifically about Indiana that impressed you, other than feeling some sympathy for them that their best player
Well,
went
so
out?
really quick, I want to say one more thing about the Achilles thing. Like it goes back to make me even think even harder and crazier that Kobe shot those free throws after he tore his Achilles. Right? You think back to what was that 2013, and he walked off the floor, and you see these other guys who are like can't even move. Like, and I know Kobe was older and maybe it wasn't as devastating to him or whatever, but it's just kind of crazy to me when you think about Kobe got up, shot his free throws, walked to the locker room, and I mean he knew he had torn his Achilles. He talked about it. Like,
Right.
but like when you think back to that and you see the other, Dame, Halliburton and Tatum's injuries, and they couldn't even like get up and walk off the floor unassisted. And then there's Kobe, and that's just maybe the Mamba mentality, right? Like how he was, like I'm
It probably was. But hey, I'll tell you the same thing, right? And I know tearing your Achilles is not the same thing as tearing your ACL, but I know, and I've told you this story, and I think I've told it on the podcast, but when I tore my ACL, whatever it's been now, 13 years ago, and I had no idea. I was surprised 10 days later when I finally went to the doctor that my ACL was torn. When I did it, I was backpedaling, like playing defense, trying to retreat, guarding somebody, and felt like my two parts of my leg went opposite, bottom and top went opposite, but it didn't hurt. It felt weird. And yet, my impression prior to that is when guys collapse to the ground and they're screaming in pain and they said they heard a pop. Like I didn't hear a pop. It just felt weird. And then to your point, and I outdid Kobe. I went back and played in the next game for about 8 minutes before I felt the same before I felt the same weird thing in my knee. So not claiming to put myself in any way, shape, or form on the level of Kobe Bryant. But my point there is that
well, you were older too, right,
every
Mike?
I was 42. Yeah. So maybe. Anyway, I think that the point here is that their guys react differently to injuries, right? And how you respond to it, what the pain is like for each individual is completely different. And I think in the case of these guys in this playoff round, you look at Lillard probably seemed to be in the least amount of pain. Like he basically just sat there kind of like dumbfounded. Whereas Tatum seemed to be in a lot of pain. Halliburton's pain seemed almost as
More
emotional as it was
reactionary, more react emotional.
almost more of an emotional pain, knowing like I can't believe that this is what's happening to me right now, more so than the physical pain of doing it. And it took it you look at the start of that game and just the fact that Halliburton had already hit what three threes at that point,
He was
and
3 of 4 from behind the arc, and I think had 9 points or 11 points already in the game. So like,
then what Indiana was able to do from that point on through the first half just speaks to the toughness that we talked about, mental toughness, just the physical toughness of what this Indiana team has been throughout the postseason. And then even in the last 8 minutes of the game, where Benedict Mathurin basically said, "Hey guys, just jump on my back. I'm going to try to bring us back." And they
well, and
never
then the
really got to
McConnell.
the point
Don't
where
forget about the McConnell run too, right? He had the 12 straight
right, but I'm
points.
saying right, but it felt like the game was over with 7 minutes to go, and they were up. Oklahoma City was up 16 or 18, and Indiana just kept coming. It would have been so easy for them to quit. And look, they never got it close to where they were threatening in those last 4 minutes, but there was a stretch where one or two more baskets or one or two more things, and all of a sudden it would have at least been interesting. It was still interesting. I figured the last 4 minutes was going to be a complete throwaway, and it wasn't. And that speaks to just again the type of team that Indiana has been since, I guess I would argue, the the miracle comeback against Milwaukee. I don't know if that's the one that changed it. I don't know if the Halliburton shot off the free throw against the Cavs is the one that shifted Indiana's mentality, but they just became a completely different team. And maybe it's just in our mind's eye as fans who didn't watch Indiana that closely throughout the entire season. Maybe they were always this team, and we discounted them last year when they made it to the Eastern Conference Finals. So I just give them a tremendous amount of credit for continuing to
Yeah,
fight through each game, through each series. And you look at, and we've talked about this before, you look at their personnel, and their personnel does not fit at all what you typically think of as not even an NBA Finals champion, but even a team that makes it to the finals. And I know that you and I talked about best, the worst best player on the team, and then you sent me the Pat Bev podcast where they were doing the same thing. And
yeah, he
it's
ripped
clear
us
when you
off,
look at
Pat
it, we just
Beverly.
it ripped us up. Pat Beverly ripped us off with that particular little gimmick. But anyway, clearly the Pacers and Halliburton and Siakam as the second best player, they just don't fit the normal profile of an NBA Finals team. And I think that it ended up being the physical toughness, the mental toughness, the 4 clutch plays, moments, minutes that got them one of those crazy wins in each one of the playoff series that they played in. There was just so many things that went right for the Pacers that it's hard to write it all off as luck. If they had one of those wins, you could say, that was lucky, and that's how they got past Milwaukee, or that's how they got past the Cavs. But they did it every single series, and I just came away so impressed with their physical and mental toughness to continue to play despite the adversity. And yet, you look at it, and I think there's been as much talk post finals about Indiana as there has been about OKC as the champs. And I don't know how to feel about Oklahoma City now because they win 68 games. Felt like coming into the series. I mean, I picked a sweep. You picked a 5-game victory for the Thunder. So did everybody else in the world. And it ended up going 7. And Oklahoma City really had to fight it out. And yet, I don't know where. There was a lot of talk going into the finals of Oklahoma City being one of the historically great teams, at least from a statistical profile. I'm not sure that I'm buying. I'm not sure I'm buying that profile. And
Listen,
even Shea. Yeah.
I was just going to say, so listen, here's the bottom line. They didn't have a great finals. I think if we, and really the Denver series was, I mean, they were a game away from losing the Denver series, right? But I had no doubt in either of the other series that they were going to win those series, right? Like that was,
Right.
So the Denver series, but that was what we said. When we said after game 1 of the Denver Oklahoma City series, if we went way back to our podcast from end of April, I'm pretty certain we said whoever wins the series is winning the championship. And I think if Denver makes it that far, if Denver wins that game, I think they win the championship. Maybe not. I mean, who knows what lots of other variables that could have happened, but I think that's what we said. And the bottom line is this. Oklahoma City was the best team all season. When you look at wins, losses, they were the best team. They probably, I don't want to say deserved to win the NBA championship, but I mean, they were the best team. They like across the board. They had hiccups in the finals. They had hiccups in the playoffs, like all championship teams do. Okay. There's very few championship teams that just go sweep, 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 sweep. This isn't the LeBron era when the Eastern Conference when he literally just swept everyone.
The faux 83 Sixers, not the faux.
Yeah. So I don't know anything about that. Anyways, the bottom line is this: Oklahoma City's probably has a chance to make. I think we can say yes, they won this championship. I think what really comes down to, if they don't win another championship in the next 2 or 3 years, then we can be like, they had a great season, but they're not like historically great. I think if this team comes back and they're back in the finals again next year, and they get through the Western Conference again next year, or they get through the Western Conference in 2 years from now, then we can start having that conversation. Like this is because I saw some posts like, could this be the start of an Oklahoma City dynasty? Yada yada yada. Listen. The bottom line is this: they have picks galore. They have youth on their side. They've got all these other things. They also have the MVP, the reigning MVP. They have lots of key and unique pieces. Once again, it'll come down to when people start to get their raises, and we're seeing it with the Celtics right now with the tax aprons and all that stuff. When these guys continue to have good seasons and their value skyrockets and they get higher contracts, there's going to be problems eventually. And maybe they're going to be able to slide new pieces in because they have all these picks that they've acquired. I mean, I don't remember how many picks they have in the draft tomorrow, but I feel like they have 2 or 3 in the first round ridiculously. And they just won the, which, by the way, the fun fact, I think I sent it to you. Nikola Topic is the first lottery player to ever to win an NBA championship without playing a game because he got injured. I think I sent that to you. first player in NBA history to never play a game and win an NBA championship. And I found that hard to believe that there's never been another player that's been hurt and their team has won the championship. They've never played a game before. But I guess when it comes down to it, you know, that was a cool fact. But anyways, um, I think Oklahoma City's legacy is going to be more predicated on how do they do the next few years. And I know that's really weird to say, but like when I think back to the Toronto Raptors championship, I don't think of the Toronto Raptors as a great team. I don't think of that team as they had Kawhi Leonard. That's what they had. They had Kawhi Leonard. They had Pascal Siakam, yes. They had Fred VanVleet in his lesser form. He was good, but not great. But I don't think back to that team as being great. But that was a one and done year, right? I mean, that was one and done. You know, I think of the Golden States, even the Cavs when they won in 2016. I think of that as a great team just because they went to the finals 4 years in a row. Okay, I know that was LeBron, okay, carrying them for two of those seasons. But I don't think that I'm ready to say that this Oklahoma City team is historically great. I think they had a great season, and maybe you know I know you're supposed to take it from year to year, and like say, because the team's not going to be the same next year. Someone's going to be different. There's going to be additions to the team or subtractions to the team. So it's hard to say that you know next year makes a big difference. But to me, when I think about it, legacy wise, I want to see what happens in the next few years. I don't want to just hold it to this one season. If that makes sense.
I think that no, it does make sense. And I think it's really a smart way to look at it simply because it's hard to imagine and look at this team and say that as they're currently constituted at the age that they are, when you think about Chet and Jalen Williams and the fact that they are both probably still a couple years away from reaching their prime, and Shea's in the early prime of when guys who are superstar talents usually start to win NBA championships. And so this team is young. They are, I would say, ahead of schedule in terms of being ready and prepared to win a championship. 2 seasons ago, they were in the play-in and lost, and now they're hoisting the NBA championship trophy. So yeah, I do think that if they were to come back and win two of the next four or two of the next five or whatever it might be, if they get multiple championships, then you probably have to look at them differently. But as a singular entity coming into the finals, there was a lot of talk of them being, again, at least statistically, I don't think anybody really was trying to compare them to the 97 Bulls or the 86 Celtics or the 85
26,
Lakers, the
2016 Warriors.
2016 Cavs, the 20
Oh, I said
the
Warriors, Mike.
whatever.
You didn't get my. You
Yeah,
didn't get my.
the 2017 Warriors. There was I, again, statistically, maybe they were in that class. I don't think anybody really was putting them in that class with those teams.
Yeah,
And I guess I wonder, and maybe this is just me looking at it, and when I think about Shea and the season that he had this year, right? He wins the scoring title. He wins the NBA Most Valuable Player award in the regular season. He wins the Finals MVP, averages more than 30, and yet when I watched him all throughout this season and even when the finals, and he had some great moments. Obviously, he wins critical game 4 where he scores whatever 15, their last 15 points in the final 4 minutes. And last night, what he was, I think, 8 for 27, but went for 12 assists and seemed like he was in command of everything that he needed to do. But when I watch Shea, I don't feel the same level of dominance that I've felt like you think about 2019 Kawhi, right? Just kind of put his imprint on that game. You think about Giannis's 50 in game 6 against Phoenix. You go back to the Bird, Magic, Jordan, the just it feels like Shea isn't as dominant, and yet the statistics would tell you that he was. And
Yeah.
I think what's interesting about this team, and he averaged like more than 1.5 blocks and 1.5 steals in this game, which in this series, which is crazy for a guy who's a guard. So I just have I said it last week, and I continue to be sort of in the same position, in that I have a hard time wrapping my head around how good are the Pacers, how good are the Thunder, how good is Shea historically, where does he fit in, how does he compare? Because I just think that Shea's kind of metronome-ish, which sounds crazy, where you just know every game he's going to put up between 28 and 36, it feels like. There's not like these 50-point explosions. There's no 8-point games where he just doesn't have it. It just feels like he's super consistent. And at the same time, he's also not a guy who has a ton of spectacular above the rim finishes and highlights and that kind of thing. He's just a guy who gets to his spots, kind of old school, and that he makes shots from the mid range all the time. He's not a great 3-point shooter. And that's another thing with the Thunder. They shot, I think, below, they were around 31%, I think, for the finals shooting from three, which in today's NBA, you think back to the Celtics winning the title last year and the number of threes that they were taking and making. We spent a lot of time talking about, is it just the math of how many 3-pointers do you make versus your opponent? And Oklahoma City kind of turned that on its head last year or this year. So there's just a ton of things about this playoffs that has been strange. We had tons of weird buzzer beaters, from all these Indiana wins to the Aaron Gordon dunk that won Denver a game. You had the statistical anomaly of Oklahoma City not shooting threes very well. You had them basically winning on defense. Both finals teams would have been, their offensive rating would have put them in the bottom third of the NBA for the regular season. I just have a hard time wrapping my head around what it all means, especially moving forward, other than to understand that Oklahoma City goes into next year as, I would say, the prohibitive, and I'm sure you have the betting lines over there
They
somewhere.
are the favorite. They're the
Yeah,
favorite.
I mean, I know they're the favorite. Just,
Houston's
I don't
number
know how,
two now.
by how much. Yeah, by how much they're the favorite, I don't know. But my point is that I think you're 100% right that you're not going to judge if this Oklahoma City championship is a singular one-off championship. I'm not sure how much this team is remembered on a national level. Obviously, locally, they'll be remembered. I think this season, if you ask people 10 years from now about this playoff experience, I think more people are going to talk about the Pacers than are going to talk about the Thunder, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, and kind of put a bow on it so we can move on. I did uh, um, gain a lot of respect for Shea last night. When Halliburton went down, he went over and like said something to him. And then I don't know, did you see post game? He went into the locker room. He went in his he went in and talked to Halliburton for a minute or two while Halliburton was getting treatment. So like I give him he earned a lot of respect because I found it very interesting. People were comparing the celebration that Oklahoma City did when they won the championship to like all the other sporting, like how excited everybody was, and Oklahoma City didn't seem that excited. And I don't know if it was a product of the Halliburton situation. I don't know if it was a product of these guys are just young, and like when you think about it, a lot of the guys on that team haven't had to go through heartbreak and hardship like when it comes to playing in the NBA because, like Chet,
Chet's played like one full season basically with the injuries that he had last
yeah,
year and
yeah,
through half of this season. So,
yeah.
or 2 years ago.
Okay, so and SGA is probably like obviously he's had experience and things like that, but I mean a lot of those guys they hadn't really had anything. I mean they hadn't had. It's not like they got to the finals and lost it. They didn't get knocked out in the Western Conference Finals 3 years in a row and then show up here. Like I'm not saying that justifies their reaction, but it was very interesting to see them not like. I think back to when we won it in 2016 and just jubilation and excitement, and then it's like what, like this is not
part of that is their personality. That's been their personality the whole season, right? I mean, that's been
Yeah,
a
it's true.
criticism
It's true.
of Shea's very even keel. There was a lot of people who talked about that after Game 6. I heard multiple podcasts and read an article or two saying, is Oklahoma City just not emotionally, they're not emotionally up. Yeah, most of the time being sort of flat serves you well, but there are times where you just have to look around and say, hey, we can't be getting our butts kicked in Game 6 by 40 points. Somebody's got to grab the team by the throat and get them fired up and get them going. And that just hasn't been the personality. Shea doesn't have that personality. Jalen Williams, Chet, it just feels like they've all just decided that they're going to kind of go about their business. And whether or not that stems from Sam Presti, whether or not that stems from Shea is the guy that kind of sets the tone, and then they've tried to build with other guys that have a similar demeanor to him. I don't know. Is it intentional? Is it just the way it sort of happened? Mark Dagnall on the sideline is kind of the same way. And yeah, it did seem like there wasn't the crazy, as you said, jubilation in winning an NBA championship. And I think your point is a good one that they didn't have that old school. We had to knock down the door and we had to get through this team in order to be able to get to where we wanted to go. It wasn't, that's just not the way that it was. And as good as Oklahoma City has been all throughout the season, Shea, because of his personality, because he's kind of quiet, because he's not a traditional highlight reel superstar. Like he's not a Jokic or Magic Johnson level passer. I'd say he's a good passer, but he's not a spectacular passer. He's not an above the rim dunking guy. He's not a Steph Curry where he's going to hit 10 threes in a game. He's just, I'm going to get my 28 to 36 every night and we're going to beat you. And that's what they did throughout the season. And that's what they ended up doing in the postseason. Got pushed by Denver, got pushed by Indiana, and ultimately they were able to win it. And
Yep.
I don't know what it means. I don't know how good they are moving forward. I know they're young. I know they're well positioned because of the youth of their team and because of all the draft capital that they still have that they can either use or eventually maybe trade for something else that can make them even better. But I do think that your point that you made was a great one, that it's not, I don't think this team's going to be judged on one season. If they're judged on this one championship, I think they're going to be a team that's going to be forgotten fairly
Yep.
quickly as an NBA champion if they don't win multiple titles. And that sounds unfair to say, but I just,
It's the
I
reality,
don't know
Mike.
that.
It's
I
not.
think
It's not unfair to say.
Indiana captured
It's the
everybody's
reality.
fancy.
It's the
Yeah,
reality. It's not.
Indiana captured everybody's attention, and Oklahoma City kind of got lost in that
Yeah.
shuffle. And
Yep.
we'll see what happens.
Yep. All right. So now we're going to shift to the trades. There's been what, four trades. We're going to talk about two of them probably more in depth, or three of them more than the other one. The poo-poo platter trade. We'll talk about that maybe briefly, but the big trade happened the morning of the NBA Finals, Game 7. Durant goes to the Rockets for Jalen Green, Dylan Brooks, 2025 first-round pick, 2025 second-round pick via OKC, two 2026 second-round picks, 2030 second-round pick via Boston, which that's starting to look maybe a little bit better, but second-round picks are second-round picks. I mean, every once in a while you hit on that. And then 2032 second-round pick. That's a lot for Durant, especially at his age. But I guess Durant was basically telling every team that he didn't want to go there, that don't do that trade, don't do this trade. Supposedly there were Cavs and other teams were in the mix. I don't necessarily know if I believe that the Cavs were in the mix for the Durant situation. But Durant moves to Houston, boosts Houston probably as the number 2 team. But once again, that's going to all be predicated on his health. How well does he mesh? He wanted to play for Ime Udoka, or Doko. How do you say his last name? I'm terrible with names, Mike. He wanted to play for that guy.
Ime Udoka.
Ime Udoka. He wanted to play for him. I mean, I don't know. I think Houston does definitely. I mean, I don't know what Phoenix is doing here. I mean, I knew they were needed to get Kevin Durant out and no one else, but now they've got four guys that basically play the same position. No true bigs. I mean, I think probably Bradley Beal. If someone will take his, I don't know that anyone will take his contract. I saw that Jalen Green is going to get
He's
shopped.
got a no trade clause, baby. He's not going anywhere.
Bradley Beal,
Yeah,
but he can opt out of that no trade clause, can he?
he could, but why? He's living in Phoenix. Everything I've seen and heard says he doesn't want to go anywhere, and nobody's going to take that contract anyway. So
Yeah, I know.
he's
I get it. I don't know. I don't know. I think this makes Houston better. Um, I think it makes them better. I mean, Dylan Brooks, he wasn't great last year, right? He was okay.
it's fine. It's Dylan Brooks. I think I mean, the bottom line in this trade is that basically you're trading and upgrading Durant or upgrading to Durant from Jalen Green, who was let's say he left a lot to be desired in terms of his ability to play the primary scoring role, the primary ball handler role for the Rockets in the playoffs. Against the Warriors, he had one, I think, 38-point game. And then for the rest of that series, he averaged like 12 points a game and shot sub 30% for sure from three. And I think he was in the mid 30s from a field goal percentage standpoint. And he's a guy who came into the league drafted number 2 right ahead of Evan Mobley. Thank goodness that was the case. And tremendous amount of physical talent. There was a lot of question marks about did he understand how to play the game? Played on for what, at least 2 full seasons with the Rockets just blatantly and completely tanking where he had the ball and Kevin Porter Jr. was there and they were just kind of doing whatever. It was almost hey, who am I going to fight with to get the ball inbounded to me so I can go up and take the shot?
Yeah,
And just felt like he kind of was, there was no adults in the room in his first couple of years in Houston. And then as the team improved and got better, he had that stretch at the end of not this season, but the stretch at the end of last season when Şengün got hurt, where they kind of reoriented the team around Jalen Green. And a lot of people thought maybe he had turned the corner because he became a little bit more efficient in the last 6 weeks of that season. And it felt like he was kind of putting it together. And then this year, throughout the regular season and the playoffs, it clearly appeared like he regressed in terms of his ability to be the lead ball handler on a good team. And so you're basically taking Jalen Green off the Rockets, who was kind of their go-to isolation scorer. We need a basket guy. And you're replacing him with, granted, a 37-year-old Kevin Durant, but I think I read or heard somewhere that Durant was number 1 in the league last year in isolation scoring. And so you're taking away a guy in Jalen Green who was not very good in that role and bringing in a guy who, as you and I have said many, many times, every time Kevin Durant shoots, I expect them all to go in. And
yeah,
so if you're Houston, you gave up Jalen Green, who, yeah, he's a talent, but when you look at the other guys that they were able to keep, young players, you keep Amen Thompson, you keep Şengün, you keep Jabari Smith, you keep Reed Shepard, you keep Tari Eason. So that's 5 dudes that are right around that same age group that you keep and hold on to. Jalen Green, they signed with that contract that was what I think it was a 3-year deal with maybe a player option for the last year that he got was well paid, but was below the max that other guys in his draft class got, which made him much more tradable. And it'll be interesting to see what Phoenix does with them, whether they keep him. Doesn't feel like he's a great fit with Booker and Jalen Green in the backcourt. Doesn't seem like that's going to be a great fit. So maybe they're going to move on from Jalen Green and deal him to somebody else. But from Houston's perspective, you gave up a guy who you were lukewarm on at best and who really has not been as productive in the league for your team as you had hoped, and you replace him with a guy who, yeah, he's 37, but last year Durant averaged like a 27, 6 and 5, and you put that
And
kind
he
of
was,
offensive
and
talent
arguably he was
around.
in a very dysfunctional situation.
Correct, correct. Some of which, at
He's
some point, he's responsible for. At some point, you have to start to look at. I saw an NBA Centel tweet that said Kevin Durant is dissatisfied with the
yeah
Houston Rockets management and has
requested a
demanded
trade.
a trade, which which I got a kick out of that. But
Yeah,
I think there's no question that this makes the Rockets better, and they held on to all of their key young assets. I think they had already the contract last year, that the fact that they didn't give Jalen Green a max and he's in their building gives you an idea of kind of they were in a sort of a you have to prove it to me mode. And certainly through last year's regular season and then on into the playoffs, he hasn't proven it. And as a result, he's now a Phoenix Sun. And I think the price that they paid for him is relatively low. Dylan Brooks is a valuable player. I mean, he can help teams, but Houston has so many guys, whether it's Tari Eason or Jabari Smith, that guys that are younger that you want them to get minutes and you want them to be able to play. And maybe when they step up and you take Dylan Brooks's 28 minutes that he was playing and divide it up with among some of those other guys, maybe Jabari Smith pops or maybe Tari Eason pops a little bit more than they even thought. So you're just opening up more opportunities. Then you look at the backcourt. Maybe you're opening up opportunities for Reed Shepard, who was the number 3 pick in the draft last year, who basically never got off the bench. So Houston is unquestionably better. Phoenix was kind of in a rock and a hard place, right? I mean, I don't know what they're trying to shed salary, but really they couldn't because of the fact that you're in one of the aprons and you have to take back money for money. So you get an asset in Jalen Green. Can he play next to Devin Booker? I don't think that's a good fit. So maybe they move on from him. What's his market somewhere else in the league? I have no idea. Phoenix just has nowhere to go because they're so far into the apron that they just they're handcuffed in what they're able to do. And as a result, they can't really rebuild. They don't have all their draft picks, so you can't tank. Matt Ishbia has put them in a mess. Let's put it that way.
yeah. All right, the next trade happened yesterday. No, 2 days. Yeah, yesterday. Well, we're recording now. It's Wednesday, but happened on Monday. The Celtics traded Drew Holiday for Anthony Simons and two future second round picks. Interestingly, Drew Holiday wants nothing to do with being in Portland. It's being reported, and now Portland might try to move him. Celtics are shedding contracts. We combine this with a trade that happened today. I guess that's probably the best thing we can do. We just talk about the trade that happened today too. The Celtics get Bang Bang George Niang, the Atlanta Hawks, and a second round pick. The Atlanta Hawks get a second round pick and Kristaps Porzingis, and the Brooklyn Nets get Terrence Mann in a 2020 and the 2025 first round pick, number 22. So when we look at that and we talk about the Celtics, they're obviously getting out of the second apron. There's also been reported as recently as 30 minutes ago that the Celtics are taking calls on both Derek White and Jaylen Brown. So they seem like they're completely under a fire sale. You know, the new owners get this team under the tax. They're not going to do anything without Jason Tatum. It's kind of crazy. We're a year and a half removed, or a year removed from them being an NBA champion, and we're shedding bills. Like it is the Jaylen Brown Derek White trade situation really going to happen? I don't know the answer to that question, but they've seemingly moved two pieces already. I saw someone float a trade out Jared Allen and Darius Garland for Jaylen Brown. Would you do that trade, Mike?
See, I don't love Jaylen Brown. I mean, huh, look, I'm going to go on record, and I've been on record. I think it's going to be really, really hard for the Cavs to win an NBA championship with Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell as your backcourt. I like both of those guys, especially when they're healthy. I think they both have tried their best to compete on the defensive end of the floor. I just think those two guys that with their size I just don't know that it makes sense. Jaylen Brown obviously has won a championship with the Celtics. I think he's probably a little bit overrated as a defender, but I do think he brings a toughness that maybe the Cavs could utilize. If that trade were to go down, I wouldn't be ecstatic, but I wouldn't be unhappy either. I think I would probably take a wait and see attitude. I don't love Jaylen Brown as, I guess, well, he's now your second best player, right? Behind Mitchell probably. I don't know. I wouldn't be opposed to it, but I wouldn't be doing cartwheels because I'm kind of lukewarm on Jaylen Brown.
Well, it's, you were this lukewarm on Donovan Mitchell too, right?
I was. I didn't. I did well. And okay, so here's the question, right? Is if you're the Cavs, and this goes back to the Halliburton injury, and we didn't really hit on it now, but I guess we can hit on it very quickly. Halliburton's injury knocks Indiana off the top tier of the Eastern Conference. So now you're basically looking at Boston is clearly at this point off the top tier. Boston, as currently constructed, is probably they might be battling for a play-in spot, or at least again they're down there with Indiana trying to get into the top six, with the roster as it is right now in this moment. So you're basically looking at the revamped Orlando Magic, the Knicks, the Cavs, Giannis, and whatever the Bucks can throw together around him. As you've said, the Cavs are clearly the betting favorite in the Eastern Conference. But 2 out of the last 3 years, they've flamed out in incredibly disappointing fashions. First against the Knicks, where they just got physically manhandled on the boards. And then this series against Indiana, where the mental toughness of this team, you got to wonder about. And so, look, I would do the Donovan Mitchell trade again based on what we've gotten, but really, we've won 2 playoff series and we've lost 2 playoff series that where we've been, I don't want to say prohibitive favorites, but certainly nobody was picking Indiana to beat the Cavs this year. And thinking back to that Knicks Cavs series, I'm betting that most people were kind of split that could go either way, or some people picked New York, some people picked the Cavs. So has the Donovan Mitchell era been an unqualified success? If you look at the regular season and you look at how good Mitchell's been at times, first team All NBA this year, probably would have been on an All NBA team last year if he hadn't gotten hurt. I think you would say the trade's been a success. And yet at the same time, in a lot of ways, it's been disappointing. Particular this particular team. And maybe you just run it back because the East is so bad and you won 64 games this year, and maybe just say it's going to be our year and we're going to have some luck. But at some point, you got to start thinking about the makeup of this team and compare it to again the toughness that we saw from Indiana. I Nothing that the Cavs have done in the past 3 years has indicated that they're anywhere close to having that kind of mental and physical toughness, at least in the playoffs.
Okay, I just thought, do you think Brown, if you had to place your bets, July 6th rolls around, is Brown and Derek White still on the Celtics?
It seems ridiculous that they wouldn't be, because if you're going to bring if Tatum's out the entire season, right? So you're going to bring him back in 2 years, and I believe he'll be like 28 or 29 at that point. So he'll still have some years left in his prime. But if you're starting from scratch this season or next season, whatever, with Jason Tatum coming back off an Achilles tear, and you don't have anybody around him except really young guys, I'm not sure that's the formula. If I was Boston, I would not. I can understand why they wanted to get off the Porzingis and Drew Holiday contracts and not pay the tax for a team that clearly is not NBA championship caliber, which is what they've had for the last whatever number of years. But at the same time, I think if you tear it completely to the studs and you trade Derek White and you trade Jaylen Brown, you're never going to get back a championship core unless Jason Tatum is LeBron and plays until he's 40 at a high level. You're just not going to be able to rebuild a team where you're going to have peak Jason Tatum, at least in my opinion. So, I mean, I think it's probably, I think they got to keep Jaylen Brown and Derek White. So I'm going to say that those two will still be on the team, but I think it might be 55-45 based on the fact that they've already, before the draft, traded both Porzingis and Drew Holiday, which are the two guys that were rumored to be on their way out the door if the ownership group decided, hey, we're punting on this coming season, which is what it looks like they're doing. The question is, are they completely throwing it away and trading Brown and White, or are they just trying to get the salaries under control so they don't have to pay the luxury tax and then trying to reload 2 years from now when Tatum's healthy? That's the route that I would take. But new ownership that you have no idea what their track record is. They have no track record. So nothing really would surprise me.
Yeah. I think they're both on the team too. I agree.
Yeah.
All right.
I think so.
We'll talk very briefly about the poo platter trade.
Okay.
The Wizards trade Jordan Poole gets to New Orleans to hang out with Zion. And Sadiq Bey is going to New Orleans in a 2025 second round pick. And then the Wizards are getting CJ McCollum, Kelly Olynyk, and a future second round pick. First of all, I know Kelly Olynyk is still in the league, but I can't believe that anyone's trading for that guy. Okay. This is a poo platter. That's all I'm going to say. I saw someone tweet, like, what team was like, we have some really terrible players that we want to get rid of, or some really mediocre, really terrible players that we go, let's call up another team that has some terrible and mediocre players. Let's just swap.
Well, it's disrespectful to CJ McCollum, right? The problem with CJ McCollum is that
he
he's
can't be healthy.
He's old, he's not healthy, and he has, I believe, one more year left on a big contract. On the other hand,
I'm not trying to be disrespectful to CJ, by the way. You know,
no,
he went.
I know you're not.
I
know you're not. But
what's CJ McCollum?
really,
when you go back, when you think about CJ McCollum's career, what's his most notable contribution to the basketball landscape?
When I think CJ McCollum, I think about the huge game he had. This is my own personal take. He had the huge game when they beat, I believe the year they beat Denver to make it to the Western
I got you beat,
Finals.
Mike.
What's that?
When he played for Lehigh and they beat Duke.
Okay, there you go.
Duke number 2 seed,
or maybe his podcast. I don't know.
Like
CJ McCollum, he's been a great player throughout his NBA career. He obviously has faults and he's not perfect, but he's been a great player throughout his career. He is not a great player at this point in his career. Plus, his contract is onerous and makes it difficult.
Him and Chris Middleton are on the same team, Mike.
Yeah, and Middleton picked up his player option for, what was it? I forget. It was a big number. I can't remember.
Shams just said on Scott Van Pelt Sports Center, "Don't go to sleep. Something big is brewing."
Okay, there you go. Well, we'll see. Maybe by the time I'm done editing, it's 12:22 a.m. Eastern time right now as we sit here. Look, if you're Washington and you want to get out of the Jordan Poole business, you bring in CJ McCollum. You're going to get a young guy, right? The Wizards are drafting number 6. They have a young team. There's probably no more professional of a guy. CJ McCollum's been the president of the Players Union. Smart guy who's been around the league. I'm sure, based on everything that I know and have heard about CJ McCollum, that he would be a steadying force in the locker room. He would be a guy who would be a pro.
The Wizards are going to be terrible next year. It's going to be glorious.
What is?
The Wizards are going to be terrible again.
I mean, the Wizards are going to be terrible, but I guess what I'm saying
is this is who they've got on their roster, Mike. They've got CJ McCollum, Chris Middleton, Marcus Smart, Kelly Olynyk. Like, come on now.
Look, the roster is what it is. Washington's not going to win a lot of games, but they do have some young guys, right? You've got Alex Sarr, you've got Bub Carrington, you've got Koulibaly. So
I'm getting excited about all those guys, Mike.
no,
Are any of
but
those
but what
guys
I'm
have any
saying is
potential to be all stars?
probably not. But what I'm
No.
saying is that what I'm saying is that if you're looking at the potential influence on turning those guys into professional basketball players who eventually can be part of a solid rotation on a good team, you would want them to be influenced more by CJ McCollum than you would be probably Jordan Poole. And if I'm Washington, I think that's the thought process in making the trade. If you're New Orleans, on the other hand, you're bringing in a guy who is younger with potentially more upside, a guy who was an important part of the Warriors 2022 NBA championship run. There were moments in that season where Jordan Poole, remember they had the pool party lineup and he was it was like when he got traded to the Wizards, he became well, it all stemmed back to the Draymond Green punch, right? It feels like Jordan Poole's career went from being one that made a lot of sense and one that he was a positive contributing member of what turned out to be a championship team to a guy that couldn't get it together and became kind of a walking meme in Washington. So if you're New Orleans, you're saying maybe we bring him in and change the scenery. He becomes closer to the player that he was early in his career at Golden State. Do I think that's going to happen? Probably not. Is New Orleans the place where you're going to get stability and have a veteran presence that's going to have a positive impact on Jordan Poole like you might have had with Clay and Steph and Golden State? Definitely not. So I don't know. New Orleans, who knows? They, to me, heading into this week, they're a huge wild card on what direction is that franchise headed. Joe Dumars is now in charge there. Is Zion staying going? We've talked a lot about Zion. I don't want to talk about him, but what's the plan in New Orleans? I have no idea, and this trade doesn't help to clarify it for me really in any way.
All right. Do we want to spend any time? Do you want to talk about the Lakers sale, Mike? You want
I
you
just briefly, I think the interesting thing with the Lakers is that clearly they have been the signature franchise over the history of the league. It's Boston, it's the Lakers, and for a short time, while Michael Jordan was in Chicago, it was the Bulls, maybe the Knicks, although the Knicks again haven't won a title in 50 years. But clearly the Lakers are, I would say, probably the number one brand in the NBA. And yet, because they've been owned by singularly by the Buss family, although they had some minority owners, including the group that eventually bought the majority interest here. They all of the Buss's money has been tied up in the Lakers, right? There's six children, I believe, of Dr. Jerry Buss that each own whatever percentage of the team, and none of them really have any money outside of the Lakers. And so this was an opportunity, I think, for them to cash out. And I've heard numerous people talk about the fact that does this fundamentally change the Lakers' fortunes? Probably not, because just like the Lakers were able to attract Shaq and LeBron and Magic and Kareem, and just it feels like players have always gravitated to wanting to play for the Los Angeles Lakers. They're the glamour franchise in LA. They've been successful throughout their entirety as a franchise, first in Minneapolis and then in LA. So it probably doesn't change that part of it. But what it does do is it allows the Lakers to invest more in their scouting department, in their practice facility, in their travel, in their player comforts, areas where, according to people inside the league, maybe the Lakers did not spend in the same way that some of the other franchises with ownerships that had deeper pockets could make a difference. I heard it compared to when this same group bought the Los Angeles Dodgers, right? The Dodgers, marquee franchise in a huge city, great market, historical team. And yet the Dodgers were kind of running around in the woods for 35, 40 years not really having much success. And then this group came in and kind of on the margins was able to do lots of little things with the extra financing that enabled the Dodgers to come back and become a powerhouse. And I think that's the thought with the Lakers. It's not necessarily that their on the court product is going to suddenly change because they have more money to spend, but it's more just all these little marginal things that maybe LA has skimped on in the past that they won't. And so now you have the combination of the advantages that the Lakers have always had. And now you've got these things on the margins that used to be an area maybe where the Lakers weren't in the top echelon of the league. And now with the deep pocketed ownership group that bought them, they're suddenly going to have all those little things are going to be on their side too. And maybe that elevates the Lakers to an even stronger position that they than what they've been in, which is kind of scary for the rest of the league. So, and plus the number of whatever $10 billion, we're going to get expansion. I think within the next 3 years we're going to have we're going to have an expansion to Vegas and Seattle. Certainly before the end of the decade. Let's put it that way.
Bring back the Supersonics. I want to root for them.
Bring back the Supersonics. Did you ever listen to the Ringer podcast about the?
Yeah,
Uh,
I listened to it the
did
first
you?
time, and then I listened to it again.
Okay, yeah, I just started listening to it. I did not listen to it the first time. I just started listening to it. I'm like, I think two and a half episodes in, so it's been good so far. But I'm a little bit behind considering it came out in 2019. So
Yeah. What were you doing in 2019? Come on, man.
you know, I have no idea. I have no idea why I didn't listen to it because, like you, I grew up. I loved the Sonics when I was a kid. I loved downtown Freddie Brown and Slick Watts and Dennis Johnson and Jack Sikma, and there was tons of guys on those early. Again, that was before you were born, but the 78, 79 era Seattle Supersonics, and then of course you had the whole Shrimp and Sean Kemp and Gary Payton and that whole group. So yeah, it would be nice to see Seattle get a team and have the Sonics back in the NBA, which I think is going to happen. Like I said, sooner rather than later. I think within the next 3 years, the NBA is going to expand, and certainly I don't think we get to 2030 without without expansion. I would be very surprised.
Yeah. All right, Mike. I have a question for you.
Yeah,
Ty
go right ahead.
Jerome is hosting a youth basketball camp in Sandusky on September 13th. How much do you think
Okay.
it costs for a 9 to 5? It's from or 9 to what time is it? Hold on, 9 to 1 p.m. How much do you think it costs to go to a Ty Jerome camp for 4 hours?
I'm going to say 275.
Oh, you are way too high. One
Way
twenty
too high.
six, 126.84.
126.84 for 4 hours with Ty Jerome. I would say that's not insane for what a typical NBA player's camp costs in terms of dollars per hour. Not that I know everything about the business there, but that doesn't seem outrageous. $126 doesn't seem outrageous to me. The number that I
That
proposed,
really screams he's not leaving Cleveland, right?
you would
It's
think, but
September 13th.
at the same time, he can't really run a camp in his new city because he doesn't know what that new city would be. So it makes sense to run it in the city where you've been. I have no idea if the Cavs are going to be able to bring back Ty Jerome and bring back Sam Merrill. I don't really know. I think the Cavs are, like I said, it's an interesting position to be in because clearly there's no doubt at this point that even during the LeBron era, I'm not sure that they were ever would have been as big of a favorite as the Cavs should be running it back in terms of being the favorite in the Eastern Conference. But at the same time, I, I I don't know if I trust this team. It's weird to be in a position with a team that has been as good as the Cavs. To me, the regular season next year is about as meaningless as it could possibly be. I mean, they could win 68 games, they could win 50, and I don't think I'm going to care one way or the other. I mean, I'll care, but I don't think it's going to matter. I think ultimately they're going to have to prove themselves in the playoffs. And the question is, where are they at in terms of the front office believing, does this team have some fatal flaw that they just can't overcome and they're going to make some moves? Or do you just say, man, the East is so decimated that let's just run it back and we should be able to walk to 55, 60 wins almost blindfolded no matter what happens. So it'll be interesting to see if the Cavs do anything. I kind of feel like they're going to do something. I don't know why, but I kind of feel like they're going to make some kind of a move with either Garland or Allen or some combination of both of them.
Okay.
You think they're going to do anything or no?
No.
No. All right. I can understand the logic on both sides. I mean, I can understand the logic of running it back, especially the way that the East is right now. But at the same time, I don't know how you can look at this team and see the playoff, I don't want to say collapse, but the the lack of toughness in both of the series that they lost 2 out of the last 3 years. I don't know how you can look at it and feel super confident that this team has everything that they need in order to win an NBA title, especially after what we watched, how good Indiana and Oklahoma City were this year or in
Yeah.
that finals.
All right, Mike. I think we said a lot.
All
We'll
right. Well,
see. We'll,
are we gonna jump back on in 25 minutes when Shams announces whatever huge move is about to be coming
if I'm not
forward?
asleep,
If
if
you're
I'm not asleep,
if you're still awake and I'm still editing, we might have to add a part 2 to this particular podcast. But yeah, I think we hit on everything. NBA draft obviously is tomorrow night. We didn't really talk any draft. Jason and I are probably not in the position at this point to be considered to be draft experts. So we will react to the draft next week. I'm sure there'll be some trades along with the drafting of players. So we'll be back to discuss that and anything that happens over the next week in the NBA. Since the last time we talked, as I told you off the top, we had a lot of things happen. We crowned the Thunder as an NBA champion. We are looking at Kevin Durant on the Rockets and all the other trades that we already hit on. And as Jason reported live during the episode, there may be something else big in the works, and we'll see. So we'll be back next week, if not for part 2 at 1:30 a.m. on whatever big event that's supposed to
if it's one
transpire.
thirty, if it's 1:30, I'm not going to be awake still, Mike. Just putting it out
Well,
there.
maybe I'll do it. Maybe I'll do a solo if I'm still editing. So anyway, all right. Well, to everyone out there, thanks for listening to tonight's NBA episode of the Hoopheads Pod, and we will catch you on our next episode. Thanks.